There we go. There we go. Okay, this is me talking at my normal talk, and we'll see how I talk sound. Okay, let's just get started. Hi, I'm Mercer, and welcome to this little draw with me video. I've never done one of these before, so it's going to be new, but I hope you enjoy it. So the first thing I'm doing is lining this. I didn't start with the sketch because this was one of the first things I had decided to draw in, I don't know, months, if not a year. And the sketch process was very not fun to watch. So it is not being shown. Just me scribbling the entire thing away. And I didn't feel like editing that, and I also didn't feel like that would be fun to watch. If I didn't feel like editing it, it's not fun to watch. So I would have had to watch it. But yeah, right now it's just focusing on lining the tree. Later on I'll do more with the line work, but for now it's just getting that shape done so I have it for later. And the tree is the only thing that I'm lining in this piece. I don't line my clouds, and I didn't feel like it was necessary to line the sand or the water, mainly because I didn't have a good understanding of what I was doing with them at the time. So the tree is the only thing lined today. Also have to line this tree, and as you can see, I very quickly give up on doing the kind of the portion squiggles like that. I end up just doing kind of ring lines instead. And now moving on to adding some colors or figuring out what colors I want. And this is going to be the biggest change. Again, this was one of the first things I've drawn in months, so I don't have the best of color theory at the best of times. So as you'll see, I start adding colors and I start messing with them, and at least in my opinion, they're garbo. They're pure garbo. And I was inspired by some of the sunsets I was seeing, and while this isn't the entire reason, I still think the main reason they don't look good is because I'm not good with color theory. I need to work on it. But I think one of the main reasons is that I was inspired by this, but I was looking at winter sunsets, and well, I'm no scientist, I'm sure they're different than summer sunsets. But in this piece, I had the idea of drawing the clouds, the more colorful parts, instead of the sky being the sunset, the clouds kind of being the sunset colors. But ultimately, it didn't work. And after that, my computer broke. My laptop died, and then further use of the computer damaged the computer, and it didn't run my art stuff, so I ultimately had to upgrade, and that gave me a chance to take a step away from this after, kind of forcing myself to figure this out and using a whole bunch of messy colors. So yeah, in between the couple months that I didn't have a functioning computer, gave me my brain kind of a chance to reset. And then we come back and I have a better understanding of what I kind of want to do. I saw some pretty cool sunset pictures and just some other good art I got to consume, and kind of felt a little bit more refreshed to go into this. But I have a new computer now, and if I doubt you'll see it with as fast as this is going. But if you see the Wii cursor hand just going across your screen, it's because that's my new computer cursor. Yeah, now I have a much better understanding of what I want to do with these clouds. And I have a lovely, like, reddy, yellowy, orangey range. And I'll be adding a little bit more once I start working on, like, shadows and highlights of the clouds. And now I'm working on where I want. Well, first I amended the coloring of the tree a little bit since I have a better understanding of what I'm doing. And now I'm figuring out where I want highlights and shadows to be on my leaves. And I will admit I'm probably being a little too detailed immediately. But I'm gonna let myself cook, as the kids say. Figuring out where I wanted highlights and shadows of these leaves was a little difficult because this isn't how palm tree leaves are. I forget what type of plants have those kind of wider leaves. Palm trees, they have like fanny. The leaves are real separated because they're not going to be flat if they're in a windy area. Those leaves are going to break apart. So this isn't a factual palm tree. That doesn't bug me because if it's easier to draw, I'm going to do it that way. So kind of figuring out how the light's interacting with these kind of full floppy leaves was a little difficult, and I probably moved on. That's why we're moving on right to the clouds and not finishing the leaves, because I was probably like, I'm tired of figuring this out right now. I'm going to do something else. And then I moved on to creating the highlights and shadows of all the clouds. And this is one of my favorite parts of drawing clouds because it's just fun adding kind of a sense of volume with the shadows and the highlights. That's what you really need to make the clouds feel full. And here you can see I'm making I'm right now just determining where I want the shadows and highlights to be. Initially, I used a light color to signify the shadows and a dark color to signify the highlights, and eventually I changed it. I don't know where this is in editing, but I do change it because halfway through I'm like, why am I confusing myself? This is stupid. Who allowed this to happen? It was me. You gotta add those shadows and highlights everywhere. You just gotta make them look lumpy, because that's how clouds are. And I do it by adding a whole bunch of just circles inside of each other. Yeah, so now we're coloring in the actual, I don't know which, we're doing the highlights right now. So I'm coloring them, you're doing this too. I'm coloring, it's the royal we actually. We're coloring in the highlights with a separate color so I could see them originally and then decide if I like the shape. Afterwards, we'll change them to the proper color, and it's easier to see how they fit in overall. Oh, we're doing spectacular. Once I'm finished using a random color to actually fill in the shape so I can see it, I'll change it to the actual color I want. And then once all of the shadows and highlights are filled in, it's easier for me to judge and change if I want to change. That was good sentencing. I can more easily tell if I want to change a color or if I want to adjust it, because now that they're all there and I see the shape that they're supposed to be in, I can more easily make those changes. So yeah, at this point we're just gonna go on through the orange cloud and the red cloud, and we'll have the shadows of both of them. Stop buzzing. Stop it, phone. So yeah, the next part that I'm doing here is adding shadows for all of the clouds, because I like to interpret them as they're layers of clouds, and I just find that fun. And of course, clouds do cast shadows, but they don't cast shadows, behind themselves like they're, sheets of paper, like a backdrop. But I really enjoy doing that. And I wanted the shadows to be, contrast? I want them to have like a high contrast with the layer behind them. And we're moving back onto the tree. After doing something that wasn't this tree, I go back and I start kind of reevaluating where I want shadows and highlights, and more specifically making them interact with the leaves behind them. I have this like ball in the center of the tree, which is honestly probably the one thing that I did not handle as well as I could have. One, if it's a really full tree like this, you're probably not going to see the little part where all the leaves are coming from. But I'm adding highlights and shadows and darker shadows for the back part of the tree. And it's just me fiddling around with coloring on the leaves right now. I think eventually I start working on the lines on the tree, but I don't know if I do that or if I go back to the clouds. This whole process is just me avoiding the water for as long as possible, because while I cut it out, there were many attempts to kind of figure out what I was doing, and I could not figure it out. And I've gone back to the clouds. So I love adding little details in the clouds. And in this piece, I tried something new where I added kind of halftone effects, kind of bleeding off of the clouds. And usually I kind of add like maybe some smears coming from the clouds that kind of look like bits of it are floating away. And I guess maybe I can show a picture of it. But this time I added some halftones, and I think they look pretty cool. Okay, here's where I do my usual nonsense of playing around with the lines and having the colors not line up with the lines. This is very much from me watching and looking at artwork from Steven Universe and how their background art does not line up. And I don't remember if they do that in Spider-Verse. They kind of do that, but it began from Steven Universe, and that's what I tend to do with a lot of my background art. And I couldn't decide whether or not I was going to do that for this, because my background in this piece is really just the clouds. Like, there are no characters in this, it's just a tree. But I ultimately was like, I'll do it. I'm gonna have some fun. This is my piece. I make the decisions. So I ultimately start moving around where the colors are, and if they're falling inside or outside of the lines. And eventually I start breaking some of the lines as well. So now I'm starting to do the water, and like I said, I tried to do the water several times and failed frequently because I, again, haven't arted consistently in a very long time. So, trying to make water look good it wasn't happening. But eventually I kind of found a process that worked, and I was just like, what if I just did the same thing I kind of do with the clouds? So I made a whole bunch of lumps, and this is, I think, the second or third time I did it. I cut the other two out, and I'm like, okay, we can do some individual layers just like before, and those can be like the foam and the bubbles and how like the light interacts. So yeah, I initially do the lumps. That's a lovely way to describe that. And then I do little holes in it to kind of be bubbles where you can see into the water. And I think this worked pretty okay for me. I'm happy with how it looks, so I'm proud of how proceeded. Thank you. I also tried to add some kind of wet sand with the same kind of technique, and then I also do kind of the foam of the rushing wave in the same technique as well. And I don't know if the sand, kind of reads as wet sand. Maybe it does, but I think it came out okay. The sand overall, I cut all of my sand experimenting out because I did not. The sand was also very hard. So real quick, I try changing the colors to maybe do more of a sunset-y colored water. You can kind of like when the sun gets down to horizon level and it makes the water all orangey and purpley. But ultimately I kind of was like, I'm just going to go back to my water. My kind of greenish blue. And then I start texturing the water. So I add kind of some reflections in there, some darker colors, and then I bring out my halftone brush again, because I love my halftone brush. And I start adding... Is that there yet? I'm there. I'm there yet. That's what I'm doing now. I don't have my glasses on, which is something I should probably do if I'm going to look at my own artwork. But yeah, I start adding little halftone circles to kind of reflect light, reflecting off of waves that are real far off back there. And I love my halftone brush. I love adding little circles everywhere. And then I learned that there's like a diamond halftone brush. I'm like, well, I gotta use these. These are really fun. And then eventually I make it real big, and I just add a whole bunch of, there we are. Add a whole bunch of those diamonds everywhere. I'm like, all these little guys are in my little workstation, and I didn't know. So yeah, I add a couple of those around. I hide them in there. That was really fun. So the next thing I have to do is mess with the sky. And I want to start adding some stars, because like it's sunset, so those stars are peeking out. Usually in my artwork I add smears all over the sky, but since I didn't do it here, well, no, I had smears on the clouds, and they kind of cover up the sky. But since I didn't do that, I needed to make the sky a little bit interesting. So I added some smears in the sky, as well as just changing blah 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 blah. No, I'm not gonna. Don't include this. Yeah, so we have some smears. And I didn't really know what colors to do, so I just made some colors I liked. And now we're going back to the water. I very, as you can see, I don't stick with like one thing. I don't just do the water. I don't just do the clouds. Like, first of all, this was, over several days, if not like a few weeks of me doing all this. So I guess my mind's jumping between things, but like, I don't stay and just, I'm gonna polish the sky. I bounce around all over the place. I start adding some waves that are a little bit closer up, give them some varying color. And then with that halftone brush again, I start adding a little bit of texture to the wave that's rolling in. Can't withstand playing with that halftone brush. Add a little bit of shadow to that rolling wave. That might just be for me. And now I start to mess with this kind of mass in the middle. And there I am with that halftone brush again. I kind of wish I just added a light gradient to each individual leaf, but instead I did this, which works, I guess. I'm fine with it. Now I'm going to start touching up some of those lines, and I'm going to start breaking a few of them. I smooth some out, I break some other ones, because that's just what I do. You work hard on your line work, and then you don't ruin it, but you mess it up a little bit. You add some little gaps in there for your eyes to latch on to. I do then have to fix some of my colors, because you move the lines and then you can see some gaps or some weird ways that the colors are interacting that you didn't plan that were underneath the lines. You gotta fix that a little bit. And since I didn't know what I was doing with that sand most of the time, going back in there with that halftone brush again, and just adding little bits of light and dark. But yeah, that's everything. Gonna sign my name. And that's the piece. It's all done. And I'm very proud of what I did. Hopefully this year I can have a more healthy relationship with my art. Because I'm relearning my process from having severely burnt out from pressuring myself to draw. But this was a lovely piece to return to. And it felt good to do too. But yeah, thank you all very much for sitting with me. I hope this was interesting to watch. I've never made one of these before. And editing this was a pain from having, I don't remember how many gigs of footage I had to edit through, but yeah, I'm proud of myself for doing this. And I hope to see you later. Not because, you should return, but more that I hope I make another one of these. This took, 6 months to do? So we'll see how long the next thing We'll see how long the next thing takes to create. But yeah. I don't know how I'm supposed to end this. This is the ending. Thank you. I did a thing.